Hello everyone and welcome back to yet another week and edition of the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. My name is Christopher Shepard. Thank you all for tuning in yet again. We should have another great week ahead of us of all things fantasy football. But today, before we get into tonight's events, we are looking ahead to tonight's games. Two, in fact, not one but two Monday Night Football games to talk about tonight in terms of betting odds, money line spreads, what have you, then looking at the prop bets for tonight. Also recapping the events of this weekend in both the NFL and college football, going over some of my fantasy stars of the week. We conclude with a little bit of a stardom sit-em for tonight's games because there are two of them. You might have to decide between some guys in that regard. But before we get into anything to do with our show today, I do want to remind you that if you do feel so inclined, please consider leaving a tip, donation, question, comment, or concern in the comments section. You guys have been doing a great job with that. But also like, follow, and subscribe to the show if you do feel so inclined in terms of leaving tips, donations, questions, comments, or concerns. You can make yourselves available to the Super Chat, Super Thanks, and Super Stickers features here on YouTube. Without further ado, let's jump right into today's show. Start off with a general betting preview for not one, but two Monday Night Football games ahead of us tonight. That is the Jags, Bills, and the Commanders, Bengals. Two very intriguing matchups. Not the best of matchups, so to speak, but it is what we have for tonight. So let's just go over the first game of the night. Jags, Bills, 7:15, I believe, is the kickoff. The spread, Buffalo's favored by 5. The over-under, 45.5. The money lines, Buffalo minus 240. Jacksonville, I believe, plus 200. So, as you can see, Buffalo a very heavy favorite, as they seem to deserve to be. I do not think that this game is going to be as even as a lot of people might expect. There's one thing that I think the Jags can take kind of credit for, is that they've built a very timely defense that's not necessarily at fault for where they are. I think that the main problems that the Jaguars face is the connection with the offense. There's a lot of talent there, and Trevor Lawrence still has time to become what they want him to be, but it's quickly running out. And as we see in terms of how these young quarterbacks get viewed in terms of the market and how much teams are willing to invest on them, he needs to return on that investment a little bit. And so far, it hasn't borne fruit for this Jaguars offense. Like I said, the pieces are there. It is not connected. On the Bills side of things, we talk about how this offense looks under Joe Brady and how he's kind of limited the damage that Josh Allen has done in terms of being this generational quarterback, but having turnovers hold him back in certain situations. What we've built is a system in which he's comfortable distributing the ball. It's not like it's so Allen-centric that he's liable to turn the ball over, but it does keep him on schedule, gives a nice tempo to this offense, and it allows for guys like James Cook and Dalton Kincaid to be huge X factors there as well. So just looking at the general betting lines for this game, I would have to say Buffalo will comfortably cover. That being said, the Jags defense, if it weren't for the ineptitudes of their offense, would be talked about more for their ability to shut down opposing offenses. Let's look at the past couple of weeks here. Yes, they played the Dolphins. That was very impressive. And then they played the Browns, where, that game was just inept all around in every single regard. But in both those games, they held these units to very few big plays. They could very well be 2-0 at this point had their offense scored more points. Had Travis Etienne not had the ball punched out. Had they not been backed up so many times against Cleveland. Perhaps we're looking at a different game here where the hype surrounding it would be much higher. Now we look at Buffalo. They've really looked like one of the most impressive teams in the entire NFL with how they played. Yes, they had a little bit of a scare against Arizona, but they came out and they really played a very, very dominant game against the Miami Dolphins in terms of limiting their playmakers, showing the lack of depth that Miami had in that game. As Shots Below the Belt said, yo, I dropped Dalton Kincaid. He did my team dirty. Don't need that negativity in my fantasy football locker room. Well, I still have him on my team because I have big hopes for this young man. And I think tonight he will have a big game. That being said, it's your decision, my man. But I think for now, it might come back to bite you in some regards there, because I still think that Dalton Kincaid is a very valuable asset to this Bills offense. They may not throw the ball as much, but when they do, look for him to be the number one target in that system outside of a guy like Khalil Shakir, who's proving himself, as we'll later see on the show, that he himself is going to be a true slot receiver who can get you valuable fantasy points. But that's just your decision, my man. I hope it doesn't come back to bite you in the future. But it's an interesting one at that. But looking at the rest of this game, I think that it will come down to whether or not the Jaguars can limit what the Bills want to do best, and that is control the football. Shots Below the Belt says, haha, nice. I think that this game will definitely come down to the Jags defense limiting how much time and control the Bills have over the football. Because if they do that, then the best weapons on the Bills' offense most likely won't be effective. For example, as Andre enters the chat, say that we know that Cook is going to get X amount of touches and Josh Allen's going to have, say, X amount of throws. If the game script for Buffalo is to control the game early, the Jags defense has to be ready from the jump to be really tied into stopping the run. Because what they do, as Andre says, Montgomery has been insane so far, 15 plus points each week. And I believe he's talking about David Montgomery. Yes, I really like David Montgomery in this Lions offense. Going up against Seattle this week, I hope he doesn't gash us because our run defense has been pretty atrocious so far. Probably the worst part of our defense, but I digress. Montgomery, really impressive in that Lions offense. And it just goes to show that Ben Johnson just has so much variety in the way he can call plays with so many weapons they have in this offense. And I think that's a scary part of how Detroit has started the season. Jared Goff has not looked very good. They might have just lost Laporta for an extended period of time. Amon-Ra St. Brown, he's timely, but he's not getting the yardage that he had last night. As Andre says, do you think Josh Allen's going to have to run tonight? That's a very good question. I think that more often than not, they're going to try to limit the amount of times he runs, but it could be a huge X factor in how the Bills kind of plan for the Jags defense. Because the Jags defense, very good sideline defense, very shocking in coverage situation. The Jaguars secondary, very underrated in what they did against Miami in Week 1. So I think Josh Allen will make the timely decisions to run, but he's not going to have to, escape out of structure, if that's kind of what you're getting at here. I think he's going to run in terms of seeing how he can help his team, and in that sense of the word, that's the way that I think the Bills will want him to run. If there's literally nothing else he can do, then that's, because he's saying, I'm just wondering because of his hand injury, he didn't at all last week. I think the Bills are aware of that, and they're going to want to protect their quarterback in whatever way they can, so that A, he doesn't turn the ball over, and B, that hand injury doesn't get re-aggravated. So it's a very good point. I think at the end of the day, they can trust James Cook a lot. He's been very good as well through these past couple of weeks. And I think in the pass game, it's not going to be anything fancy. It's not going to be deep shots down the field. It's just going to be timely, short to intermediate routes that keeps the rhythm of the offense going. But a fantastic question from Andre, as usual. But let's shift our attention a little bit, because we don't want this game to get lost in the luster, no matter that it's the kind of undercard game in that sense of the word. Commanders-Bengals. This game is a very weird game, very weird interconference game, just because these two teams could not feel any more different right now. Because the Commanders, no one really knows what they are. They're largely unknown commodity outside of, Jaden Daniels, a decent Russian quarterback. I kind of like Brian Robinson Jr., Terry McLaurin's underrated, but it's not like a team that you feel is either well-rounded enough that you can appreciate and watch, or a team that's bad enough that you know their limitations. They're kind of there. Whereas the Bengals, we now know kind of where they are. They're a team that can still play with the best of them in the AFC. They still have the whole contract situation kind of hanging over their heads between Chase and Higgins. They still have the Higgins injury. But at the end of the day, I'm less concerned about them than I am the Commanders. And that's reflected kind of in the betting lines for tonight. They're 7-point favorites. The over-under is 47.5. Kind of high for this game if you want my humble opinion. And they're minus 340 in the money line. Cincinnati, that is. Washington is plus 270. And it just goes to show how random this game kind of seems. I mean, I guess if Jaden Daniels can be efficient in how he runs and protect the football, then maybe this game is closer than people expect. But I really haven't seen that much Commanders football this season to really know how and when Jaden Daniels is running and using his legs. There also isn't necessarily as much of a vertical component as I thought in this Commanders offense when Jaden Daniels was drafted to them. I thought that Jaden Daniels would definitely open up the vertical passing game, and it may have to do with the loss of Jahan Dotson in free agency, where you kind of lose one of your biggest weapons in terms of matchups in that now it's just Terry McLaurin, and there's really no one outside of him that's going to really step up in my opinion. Maybe Zacchaeus, but I really don't see anyone outside of just him alone that can really help in the passing game. And it will reflect as the season progresses in terms of how Jaden Daniels depresses. As Andre says, Jamar's going under in terms of yards. We will get to that. That's a perfect segue, actually, into my next segment if we have to take a quick break to talk about the prop bets for both of these games. Very bold prediction from Andre to take us into this short break, but we will be coming right back to talk about some prop bets, so you don't want to go anywhere.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?